Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Life and Comedy. I'm your host, Will Beckton. This is a podcast about comedy and the people who dedicate their life to it. My guest today is David Pasquesi, who is a Chicago native and a highly respected improviser. He studied with Del Close and performed at Second City and Improv Olympic. He has also appeared in things like Groundhog Day, Strangers with Candy, and Veep. I kind of can't believe I talked to him. Here's that interview. I'm here with David Pasquesi, improviser and actor, also a great thinker of improv and a carrier of the torch. A friend of mine who is a Chicago guy, Bob Merlotti, was nice enough to introduce us, and I'm very excited to be talking to you.
Thanks, Will. Me too. Bob's a heck of a guy.
Yeah, he's super funny, and the Chicago influence in my life is pretty pervasive, and so I would like whenever I run into anybody that kind of had their feet on the ground, especially in the days that he was around, and when you guys met, my ears always perk up.
Yeah, and more recently, he brought me to my first Doug Stanhope show.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my friend Nick McKinney is friends with Doug Stanhope, and I think I saw him in the Comedy Cellar, I want to say. But yeah, he's a fascinating guy, especially with the Arizona compound and just the way he lives his life.
Fantastic comedian, too. Yeah, interesting dude, but also he's just fucking funny.
Yeah, Relentless comes to mind. Was Second City your first exposure to improv?
No. My first exposure to improvisation was the Players Workshop, which was from a student of Viola Spolin by the name Josephine Forsberg. And my first teacher was Judy Morgan. I stumbled in there tagging along with my brother when I was halfway through college or, in my third year of college.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny because when I try to connect the dots, because I'm a big Del Close fan, I'm a big Mike Nichols, like Nichols and May fan, and sometimes I conflate the Compass Players, Second City, Improv Olympic, even the Annoyance sometimes gets kind of thrown in there. So I really am interested in Improv Olympic with Barron's Barracudas, and also the fact that you were actually a part of, as I understand it, almost like the guinea pigs of figuring out the Herald, which to people that don't know what the Herald is, it's basically a long form improv. It's like a structure that so everybody kind of knows what's going on, basically.
There is a structure to it, but it ultimately is just a group exploration of a theme within this pretty set structure. And we just happened to be there when Del was coming up with that format that would make it not uniform, but we'd all be trying to do a similar thing. And now there had been a Herald before then. If we want to get real technical, they had done the Herald before with the committee in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
They're the ones who came up with it. They're the ones who named it. It was more than a montage. It was things would come back, but they primarily did not use it as a performance. It was a way to generate material because they were doing a sketch show, a cabaret show in the style of Second City out in San Francisco as well. Del was their director, and they used this exploration to come up with material. Some scenes would come out of that, and then they'd work on them. And apparently they did use it as a performance piece, as a placeholder while they were working on a new show. So we were not the first ones to perform it publicly for pay, but I think we were the first ones to perform it publicly for pay when the audience knew that's what they were coming for.
Yes. It wasn't a bait and switch, and it was the intended end result, not just something to get to a destination.
Right. And it was this notion that Del had that improvisation itself could be the entertainment rather than a means to create the entertainment.
Yes. Yeah. So I studied and performed at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York in the early 2000s.
The early 2000s. So that was in the old, like the tiny one, right?
Yeah. The former strip club.
That was fantastic. I love that place.
Did you ever perform there, like as
we did.
The marathons, or?
Yeah, we came in for a marathon, maybe the first one.
Oh, wow.
We did a Herald.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we did a couple old Second City scenes.
Oh, wow.
that Del had directed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Joel Murray.
Oh, wow.
Noah, probably.
UCB, I mean, people listening to this will either be intimately familiar with them or only know Amy's name. But basically, it was Amy Poehler, Matt Besser, Matt Walsh, and Ian Roberts. And those guys were all, steeped in Dell's teachings and passed them along to everybody that studied there. At the beginning, the four uprights taught the classes, and then as they kind of got busier with the TV show and more people were kind of deputized to teach, they taught kind of less and less. Although I think Ian taught kind of the longest. But in addition to them, there were people like Adam McKay, Horatio Sands, Ali Farinakian, and Drachin Fay, who were all very much a part of that world.
And Armando.
And Armando Diaz, yes. What a great guy.
Right. And then that theater was responsible then for the Pit and then the Magnet and,
Yeah. I don't know if I ever took an improv class with Armando, actually. I think I took a sketch writing class with him, that was in his apartment. But yeah, Armando, I mean, there's a forum named after Armando. I think that's named after him, the Armando.
The Hoot Nanny?
Yeah. Yeah. So every once in a while, I would catch a glimpse of either Pat McCartney or Ali or somebody during a marathon. A lot of times they'd be like, you got to make sure you see Bass Prov, or you got to make sure that you see one of the kind of OG Chicago groups. And there was something about it that just the commitment level was very high, and the willingness to take one's time. I was always impressed whenever I saw any of those Chicago groups.
Coming through for a marathon?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever perform with any of the four uprights back in Chicago? Or
no, they came after us. All the stuff that you are mentioning now came after me.
Gotcha.
Not long after, but yeah, the Upright Citizens Brigade was a Herald group too.
Yeah.
And all the other people you mentioned were family and stuff like that. They were Herald teams at IO.
Yes.
And then Bass Prov was Mark and Joe, and they were great.
Yeah.
They were more Annoyance folk.
Yeah, I think Walsh was an Annoyance guy, at least at one point. But yeah, I've really been enjoying the Improvisation at the Speed of Life book.
Well, thanks.
Especially as it pertains to the rules of improv and kind of what those rules actually mean in terms of things that can serve you well and things that might kind of hem you in, yes and in particular.
When people talk about improvisation, they often say the first rule is yes and the notion behind it is to agree with what we're presented with and then add to it, not just yes, but yes and. So that's the idea behind it. And of course, a lot of people like me, when you're first getting going, you hear that rule. And so you think that you have to respond to every question with those words. Yes, and I'd like a sandwich as well. And that's not really what it means. It's, I agree that this is true, and I'm going to respond honestly, given everything we know up until this point. So the words might not be yes, and the words might be fuck you. I absolutely agree that that's a fire. If that's a fire, for you to tell me to jump in it is ridiculous for me. I would never do that. So for me to jump in it is to deny that it's real.
Yeah.
A lot of those rules that came about aren't really rules. They were just observations that those people had after a show. They were trying to figure out, these are great improvisers and performers and comedians, by the way. And they're trying to figure out what were the common things in the scenes that tended to go better.
Yes.
It just happened to be common features that they noticed. But now we take them as rules, and that's how we're going to engineer a good scene. But that's not at all what they are.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a really big Nichols and May fan. The kitchen rules, which sounds sort of related to what you're talking about.
These are exactly the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. We have observed over time, over a series of performances, that these choices tend to work out well. It doesn't mean you have to do this. It doesn't mean you have to avoid a transaction scene.
Right.
Like if somebody comes up to you and you're obviously working at McDonald's, you shouldn't try to avoid a transaction scene if you're the checkout clerk at McDonald's, if that's what you've been, imbued with or whatever. So, and then also I can still remember like level one moments or Herald team shows where I either was coy with something because I was trying to draw it out, or I denied something because I thought denying it would be funny and just ruining the scene, if not the show. You can just like feel the air go out of the room, basically. And one of the tenets, UCB Don't Think, was one of their big slogans, which basically means don't come armed with prefabricated bits you want to work into the Herald.
Shoehorn in, yeah.
Just moment by moment, respond how you'd actually respond. And you have to have faith that you and your scene partner will end up where you should end up. The way you describe that in your book, I think it's the best way of sort of framing it that I've read. And also, I don't know if this is like a misdirect on purpose, but the name of the book is Improvisation at the Speed of Life. And that does not mean that you're improvising really fast.
Or slow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like, because that's the term also is slow comedy. And like, I understand what they're saying, but it's not artificially slow or fast. It's just what seems to be called for.
Yes. By the time I got to the Conan universe, it was in LA. It was after the big Tonight Show debacle. But a lot of those writers that were all Chicago guys made the trip over to LA. So Andy Richter.
Yeah, he was Annoyance.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
Brian Stack.
Fantastic.
And Brian McCann.
Fantastic.
Yeah, both longtime Conan writers. I mean, I saw them in a bunch of ass cats. And it just made me feel so good when I started that job. Like the first day I started, Stack was sitting outside of Conan's office and was like, "Hey, Will," or whatever. And that was like, I had this feeling of like, everything's going to be okay. You know, like this is really awkward. I'm starting a new job. Everybody here seems to know each other. But Stack's here. So
yeah, he's a pretty great guy.
A lot of those early writers' rooms, and this was due to Andy's influence, were comprised of improv people, more tilted towards stand-ups the further the show went along. But especially in the early days, I really think that informed the whole vibe of the show and kind of the way things were developed.
Yeah, it's a different, I do think that there, and it still exists, I think there's a sense of community more than competition. I think that's generally still true. And it's kind of contrary to a lot of career paths in entertainment.
Yeah. With improv, it's like, usually you're doing it for free. I mean, there's so few instances where you're getting paid.
Well, also the qualities that make one a good improviser aren't necessarily monetizable. You can't be a star.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
So in the movie, Trust Us, This Is All Made Up, the TJ and Dave movie, one of my favorite scenes is when you guys, I think it's the day of a show, like leading up to the show, and you're basically people watching and kind of, getting in sync and also, amassing shared or individual reference points for the day. Do you mind sort of talking about that process a little bit?
Not at all. Alex Karpovski directed that documentary, and I think he did a great job. For me, that's the first time improvisation on stage was watchable.
I agree.
On screen.
Same.
The way he shot it, we had like 8 cameras. He sat in the bathroom upstairs at the Barrow Street Theater in New York and talked to his cameraman.
Oh, wow.
Who we had in Duvetine duck blinds, right? So we couldn't see him and the audience couldn't see him.
It was so well captured. I kept on waiting after seeing, I was like, well, they got away with it for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But wait until you watch 5 minutes of it or whatever. And I was like, no, this is actually like, this works.
Right, because that's always the way it is. Like, oh, that's okay right now. Oh, God, Jesus, what the fuck?
Yeah.
We don't do it as much anymore, but when TJ and I used to travel, we used to spend time together, cruising around town, and then spend time apart. So that, like if we spent our entire day together and we just go walking up on stage, I got nothing new.
We were together all day.
You saw everything I saw. So then we kind of go our separate ways. And we don't do that as much anymore. Yeah, we just cruise around and hang out. And that's what we do anyway. We kind of did it more for that documentary than we ordinarily do. But yeah, that was just kind of how we travel.
Yeah. Like you don't have to be like dominating a trivia night or whatever, but you do kind of have to have a broad reference base, right? Like
it's really helpful, I think, for an improviser to have thought about everything.
Yeah.
When you're surprised about a topic on stage, that's fine. I just love watching people think. I think that's wonderful theater, to watch someone try to figure out what they think about something. Like you were saying, this maybe people from Chicago you saw working a little slower and quieter.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be filled with sound. It's already filled. The moment is full. We don't have to shoehorn a bunch of jabber into it.
Yeah. It's funny. I think that a lot of people are sort of fans of improv without knowing it. Like, there's like the Veeps and the Curb Your Enthusiasm, which Veep, as my understanding, it was scripted, but there was room for improv. And if good things happened through improv, then they would sort of get the coverage required to be able to include that in the scene. And then also the Harold Ramis kind of, if you want to call it a genre of movies, there's things that come about through improv that feel lived in and earned. And
you feel honest, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, like there's contemporaries like Judd Apatow, and there's different people that
the
work.
Christopher Guest films and things.
Oh, yeah. The Christopher Guest films is a major sweet spot.
And, the first one, Rob Reiner, right? The
Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap.
Yeah. You're sort of trying to catch lightning in a bottle in a certain way. But as long as you can trust each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at improvisation. It is an exercise in faith.
Yes.
We don't have to worry about where the story's going or if it's going to be funny and the audience is required for that. They also have to have the faith that, these guys, they don't need me to worry about them.
Yeah.
So it has a lot to do with trust.
Yeah.
And, also even just rapt attention in silence is pretty great experience for an audience.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that when I do shows with TJ, we don't promise it's going to be comedy. All we're promising is that we didn't practice.
Yes. Hence the title, Trust Us. This is all.
We did not prepare. That's the only thing we promise.
So just to make sure that people know what TJ and Dave is, this is you and TJ Jagodowski, who is not, you weren't necessarily contemporaries.
No, he's considerably younger than I am. He came through Second City and was on main stage, I think, 10 years after I was.
So it's interesting because I knew it was a very highly regarded improv show, just the two of you. And I knew it was like around an hour, but I didn't realize kind of how unique the form it was. What you guys sort of organically came up with. When you take the stage, are you basically trying to have a blank, almost like a meditative, like...
Both TJ and I take a couple minutes right before the show, like starting at about 5 minutes before curtain. We go to our corner of wherever we are and just shut the fuck up.
And are you trying to reach almost like a tabula rasa state?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully something like that, which is, impossible, but that's where we're heading. And then we get out there and we say hi, the lights go down. And when the lights come up, we just start whatever that feels like.
Yeah. And just moment by moment.
Right. And that's the thing. Moment by moment, we just do this and don't worry about where it's going and don't worry about a story and don't worry, just moment to moment. And it all tends to reveal itself.
Yes.
If we're paying attention.
Yeah. And that's the big thing. Paying attention. If I had to pick kind of the most important tenet, would it be that?
I would say so. Yeah. They use the term listening, but that's exactly what it's just paying attention with everything. It's not, because listening sounds like it's just ears, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's paying attention to a whole lot of stuff.
Visual cues, how long it took somebody to reply.
Try to put your eye in the back of the room. What does that look like?
Wow.
It's paying attention to a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
We pay real close attention at the beginning because then that's what we're going to do for the next while. So we want to make sure that we're doing it, that this is exactly what's happening rather than we made it something else. We have to make sure, because if we don't kind of lock in at the beginning, we never catch up.
Oh, wow.
But if we do lock in at the beginning, it's just this really easy thing to just, then this was next and this is next and this is next. Otherwise, it's like, trying to.
Yeah.
And always, any mistake that we've made could have been avoided had we paid closer attention to something.
Wow.
Always, 100% of the time. Had we paid closer attention, that would not have happened.
And can you pinpoint the moment usually? Can you kind of pinpoint the going off the rails or going down the wrong path moment?
I didn't see that he had done something, right? I didn't see that TJ had reacted in this way to that thing.
Wow.
But they all saw it.
Oh, wow.
So they all knew this was wrong, right? But I didn't know it.
Wow.
because I wasn't paying close enough attention. Now what do we do? That was wrong. That couldn't have happened in real life.
Yes.
Now what do we do? I don't even know that I'm wrong yet.
So you sort of have egg on your face.
Right. And I don't know it. Everybody else does.
Yeah.
Oh, now we got to clean up this mess.
Oh, God.
And then move forward or ignore the mess. And then we're asking people to pick and choose what's real.
Oh, man.
That kind of thing causes a huge problem.
That's really interesting.
Tiny thing can cause a huge problem. So we try to pay attention to the tiny things.
It almost reminds me of the Dallas Dream Season disaster where they like killed off Bobby Ewing because of like a contract dispute with the actor, but then it was unpopular decision. So they brought him back and they said that the whole season was a dream, but then they kept people that were introduced during the season. It was like, okay, the reality's shot. Like nobody fucking cares anymore. Like,
yeah, right. Audiences are gracious and stuff, but we're trying to not do that.
Yeah. And then there was an interesting thing that you guys said in the documentary that was like, when you're arriving at the theater, mentally, like the show is kind of already started. Like the train is kind of like already on the track. And it's just like a question of both you guys jumping on the train.
Yeah. And I don't know that it looks different from the outside, but it's different for us in that we're not trying to put on a show. We're trying to discover what scene that already exists that we're stepping into.
Wow.
As we start to figure it out, it becomes real clear.
Yeah.
And it takes a while, and we're in no hurry because nobody's going to cut us off.
Sweep edit.
Right. Nobody's going to do that to come and help us. And so we're on our own, for good or for better or worse, we're on our own. But we have plenty of time.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it.
I mean, I haven't improvised in a while. You know, I still have it in my bloodstream to a certain degree, but I don't really think about, you know, freezing up on stage or being in my head in that way. But I do think about it in, you know, my own life, with especially being present and paying attention, you know, at home and also work situations. You know, I mean, I can remember times when I was working at Conan, when I would be in a meeting, it wouldn't be like I was like spaced out and thinking about like something else or whatever, but I was thinking about what we were talking about, but I wasn't paying attention to the person who was talking. And so every once in a while I would say something during a meeting and everybody's just like, oh, dude, you just fucking
just said that.
Yeah. But I wonder, you know, because a lot of times good improv comes from like similar concept as good just life interactions go.
Yeah, I mean, the two of us don't tend to, our show isn't stripped from the headlines and stuff like that. It's just more relationship stuff, which is so universal. And
yeah,
it's real simple. We're not trying to fucking solve anything. We have gone up on nights when pretty important historical events have occurred.
Oh, okay.
And it doesn't really factor into our show.
Yeah.
You know, kind of the belief is, or it's really nice to have a distraction.
Yeah.
That's it.
I remember after 9/11, everybody kind of didn't know when the theater was going to open back up. So I remember like literally going to the front door on 22nd Street and seeing if there was like a note or whatever. But it was the first night that the theater opened back up, and the game of the scene was trying to figure out who was essential and non-essential at an office, because there was so much talk of only essential employees report to work. It was just like a nice way of addressing something that was like on everybody's minds. I mean, it wasn't about 9/11 at all.
Right.
But it stemmed from a thing that was on everybody's minds because of...
Right. Absolutely. I'm discovering I'm non-essential.
Yeah.
Wow. In my house? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gone for a week and things improved.
Huh.
So you were in Strangers with Candy, you know, with Amy Sedaris, Stephen Colbert, Paul Dinello, and then Mitch Rouse. I don't know. Was he ever on camera, or was that more of a writer producer?
He was on camera. He was a copper.
Okay.
In I think the first one, but all of the ones you mentioned were in Exit 57 together along with Jody Lennon. And that's kind of came out of that. They were just younger than me at Second City. They came in just after me. So I knew them back in Chicago, and we goofed around and had me come out. And I wrote on Exit 57, and then brought me out to do Stu the Meat Man on Strangers with Candy.
Yeah.
That was so much fun.
Love that show.
So much fun.
Yeah.
All of them are just so great.
No, I was lucky enough. My friend Richie worked on that show, and I went to the rap party, like the final rap party. Were you at that? Just out of curiosity.
No.
It was really electric because, this was during the days of the 3-season and out Comedy Central, like same thing happened at Upright Citizens Brigade. But at that rap party, they hadn't delivered the show to the network until the last possible moment, because the finale was basically like a burn. It was like a fuck you.
Sure was.
Comedy Central. And it was really funny because Strip Mall was the show replacing Strangers with Candy. And so the plot of the episode was like a strip mall was slowly replacing all the classrooms and everything.
Yep, from within.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Which I thought was so clever. It was like, why is there, like, I went in to go teach science and it's a sticky bun or whatever. But I do think there is something to when you kind of find your tribe and also develop trust with people that, like when you're starting out, those relationships are really important.
Being from Chicago, anytime I ever walked on any project, I knew people.
Yeah.
Almost every time. It was like not that long ago that I walked on my first show ever that didn't have anybody.
Yes.
That I knew. Also, that's who hires me, people I know. Strangers don't tend to hire me. It really does feel like, oh, okay, we're fine. We know this language.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I imagine with Veep, I think that might be one of the best shows I can think of as far as just like putting people in good situations,
Well, also so many having connections with Chicago.
Yeah.
Not from Chicago. Gary Cole, Kevin Dunn, Matt Walsh, Tim Simons, Anna Klumsky, Julia, almost everybody.
Yeah. And Iannucci is fascinating to me. I assumed he was from Italy just because of the name. I know, but he's Scottish.
I don't speak a word of Italian.
Yeah, oh, that's funny.
With a name like that, you should learn a couple words, man.
I know. Yeah, just to like fend people off.
Boy, he's great. That whole group, the writers, and it was really wonderful. So when TJ and we do the last couple of years, we've been doing shows in London.
Oh, cool.
And I see the old gang, some of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's really fun. Writers and performers from Veep.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was part of the Alan Partridge Brain Trust as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fantastic show. And also those I love how they just change it up so drastically from season to season.
And you, speaking of Italy, do you spend time in Italy, right? Am I?
I do.
Yeah.
It's pretty and delicious.
Yeah.
People are nice. I actually shot a film in Italian.
Oh, wow. So you speak Italian?
I do.
Yeah.
But they had to add a line in the film that I have an American accent.
Oh, okay.
So Italy holds a pretty important part in my career life, too, because I went and studied there in Rome, and my roommate was Joel Murray.
Oh, that's right.
And that's where I met him. And when we got back, we started to perform a little bit, and he got the advice from his brother, hey, if you're ever interested in this guy, I didn't know who this was, Del Close, is starting to teach again.
Oh, wow.
And of course, they all knew Del, and Joel had known Del, but I didn't. And that's when Del was starting to do the Herald. He had merged with Sharna, and they started to do this, to come up with the Herald. There was no performances of it. They were just still trying to figure out what it was.
Wow.
Or how to do it more consistently. And then also who lived across the hall from us was Ike Riley, whose music we go up to. TJ and I have gone up to Ike Riley's music every time for however many shows we've done.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, that factors in pretty heavily.
So one of my teachers, and he also coached my Herald team, is Michael Delaney, who's a really good improviser. He was on the Swarm, but he said that seeing Second City Torco was a big deal for him because he was in Florida and kind of in the middle of nowhere in terms of like performance goes, or kind of having any kind of influence of like, hey, I can maybe do something like this or whatever. So he puts a lot of weight on having seen that as far as like, oh my God, people do this, you know?
Yeah. It's not uncommon for people that end up doing it, that was something like that happened to them. It's like, wait a minute, that's a job?
Yeah.
I want to do that.
Yeah. Those are other humans. I'm a human. Maybe I could, you know.
Yeah.
But he went to a workshop, he and Andy Secundos, another UCB guy, for when they opened up IO West in LA.
Mm-hmm.
But he recorded a speech that Dell gave that group of students.
Oh, wow.
And he sent me some quotes from it. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you don't mind hearing, I'd love to hear your reaction to a couple of these.
Great.
Okay, so here's the first one. One kind of comedy is very fast, the kind that produces wit. Somebody hands you a straight line and bang, you're there with a response. But that kind of thing turns the entire world into your straight man, which is not really that cool.
That's pretty great.
Does that sound familiar? Did he ever say like?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned those mistakes that you made about, denying something because it was funny, and maybe there was a joke in that, maybe there was a small laugh, but it ruined the scene. We were, if not punished, it was, it was clear that kind of behavior was discouraged at all costs.
Yeah,
we're not trying to be funny. We're not going for comedy. That's not what we're doing up here. We're doing something else. And so I always like that distinction. And
yes,
that's a really great way to put it, that's not cool, man.
Yeah, you're just like, it's sort of, I mean, I love my dad, just so everybody knows, but my dad is very much I have the floor. I'm going to say the funny stuff. You guys are all here listening to the funny stuff. And that's fine, but I mean, it can get old.
You can't work with that.
No.
Like it's the notion, like you mentioned stand-ups before.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they're by definition, they're not team players. This is something else. There's no all-star. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
We're working for something that we don't even know what it is in service of that thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group mind aspect of it that is rendered impossible.
Or if you're going for jokes, right? And also, it doesn't mean it's not funny, because people honestly in life are funny. But if it's at the expense of the scene or anything that's been established up until this point.
Yeah, then it just screeches to a halt. Okay, then this is the second one. I like to flat foot start myself. Nothing happening at all. Whatever energy develops out of this thing is going to be earned. So it starts real.
I like that. Sounds like kind of like the way we try to start a show.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds TJ and Dave to me. Yeah.
Like what you had talked about, not bringing in any comedic premise that I thought about yesterday. Here's a good opening line,
Yeah. That's a hard urge to resist. I remember seeing not stand-ups, improvisers, like before I'd started to try it myself, because you see people on the back wall and you're like, oh, they're cooking up jokes,
Right.
But what they should be doing is hopefully they're paying attention. Hopefully they're not saying, that guy just said something about his urethra hurting. I can make a urethra Franklin because that guy's, they're not doing that.
Fuck, it just went past. Now it's too late. Now I got to wait for somebody to bring it back around again.
Exactly. Okay, here's another. Sometimes I think, wouldn't it be nice to do an evening of comedy in which nobody ever got caught with their comic intentions hanging out?
Yeah, same thing that we're talking about, right? Try to be honest in the moment.
Yeah. And then here's the last one I'll read to you. Unless we overcommit to this work, we aren't really taking it seriously enough.
Great. Yeah, he was, he kind of dedicated his life to this idea that it's pretty cool. Like in the mid 80s or whatever, there was a group of us in that room at Cross Currents upstairs. Maybe there was 15 of us, something like that.
Wow.
And except for the people at the committee in San Francisco years before, we were the only people on the planet that knew what a herald was. A few years ago, TJ and I were teaching a workshop in Vienna, and there was people from everywhere: Russia, Germany, Italy, France, Poland, Slovenia, Slovakia, all sorts of. And we started talking like, in the second beat of the herald, and we was like, hey, hang on a second. I'm sorry. Does that mean anything? It's like, did anybody, and they're like, anybody not know what a herald is?
Yeah.
No one didn't know what a herald was.
Wow.
Around the world, not just the English speaking world, but I mean, these are people that are interested in improvisation, but that it traveled that far from 20 people in a room 20 people on the planet to, we started talking about it, Harold, in some improv workshop with people from all over, and they all knew what we were talking about.
Yeah.
He really did dedicate his life to it. And he was a fucking jagoff in a lot of ways. Not saying he wasn't, but I wouldn't have the life I have without him.
Yeah.
He was great. And also Play at the Top of Your Intelligence. That's the one, I think, that, they shared that with Second City. So Second City, their philosophy was that improvisation is not in itself something you can sell a ticket to. That was their main distinction. That's it. But they also play at the top of your intelligence. Bernie Salins was a fucking great guy. And his problem with improvisation was that it lacks some of the things that he values in theater, sketch scenes that were worked on.
Yeah.
He came and saw TJ and Dave one night on a Wednesday night at 11 o'clock. He's probably 80 years old at the time. It was no trick for him. He was an amazing guy. But 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night up in Wrigleyville, and he comes and sees it. And I go, no, hey, what do you think? He goes, well, you guys can do it. Doesn't mean it can be done.
Oh, man. So TJ and Dave, you guys have some shows coming up, or?
London in August and Ireland in September. So it'll be London, then Dublin, maybe Galway, and then Belfast. And then TJ and I shot a pilot that we wrote.
Oh, cool.
And we've been trying to sell that. It's called Bettendorf Talks. So if any of your viewers are interested in funding a season of a television program, we're taking donations.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. I really enjoy improvisation and talking about it too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed meeting you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, David Pasquesi. I highly recommend the TJ and Dave book, Improvisation at the Speed of Life. And trust us, this is all made up. The documentary directed by Alex Karpovski is also great. Thank you, Bob Marlotti, for arranging the interview, and Michael Delaney for providing the Del Close quotes. Delaney is actually working on a book right now, which I believe will include a lot more of that talk that Del gave at IO West. Life and Comedy is recorded at Jett Road Studios. Please rate and review the show. Thanks for listening.